Hello, this video is going to walk you through the final project for MDS 420. It's called the Global Analysis of Globalization. We're going to start it this week. You'll turn your first initial thoughts in by the end of Module 4. You'll get some feedback from me and from your classmates in Module 5. You'll have an additional opportunity to submit for feedback, but for no points in Module 6, and then the complete assignment, which is both a paper as well as a video presentation, will be due at the end of Module 7. So I first encourage you to go into the instructions for the assignment, but I do recommend that you also have open at the same time your globalization workspace. This is going to walk you through the different sections for your brainstorm. And as you're going through this brainstorm, you'll see that this connects to the 5 topics that you see here as part of your instructions. In simple words, you're going to be looking at how globalization affects you, and then looking at a community, a country, a family in a region of the world that you feel is different from yours as much as you possibly can get. So for me, I am a white middle-class woman living in the United States who has multiple affiliations with different religions. I would likely choose a country in the global south. I would likely choose a family that is racially different from me. So African, Hispanic, Latino. I could likely choose Chinese, Japanese, many of the different Asian races, and then similarly would look for a religion that is different than mine. So Buddhism, Hinduism, Islam. There are tribal religions. You could also look for a family that doesn't have a religion, but you want to look for a family that is different from yours as much as possible. And I encourage you to find that using Dollar Street. That will help you kind of narrow down a region. It will also help you narrow down a family that is in a different, not just a different region, but also a different economic bracket as you. And that's a good jumping off point for this project. You're then going to analyze globalization's effect on you in different categories, and we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail in a moment, as well as the effect on globalization of this family that you have chosen. You're going to draw out similarities and differences as to the effects of globalization. This is going to be really important to go just beyond the similarities and differences, but analyzing why these similarities and these differences occur. Thinking about cultural changes, religious effects, political, economic, social, environmental factors. Be thinking about how these different factors might impact the way that globalization is affecting you or affecting the community that you're looking at. And then we'll finish with some conclusions. So if you look at your globalization workspace, you'll see your 5 sections, and these 5 sections also connect to the modules that we've had. So section 1 is going to be your introduction. Who are you? How are you looking at globalization from a perspective that is understandable to you? So use Module 1's Introduction to Globalization and Globalization Theories to let both me, but also your classmates who are going to be watching your video know how you are viewing globalization and what that lens is. Section 2 is brainstorming yourself and then globalization's impact on you. You'll note that trade and industry, race, and health are the 3 required areas that you'll have to look at. These are connected to modules 4, 5, and 6. And then you'll have 2 other things that you'll want to look at. So for example, you could do education, you could do agriculture, you could do environmentalism, you could do leisure activities. There are plenty of options that you can pick, but you'll need to pick 2 more. Section 3 is all about the other culture that you found. So I strongly, again, recommend you utilize Dollar Street to help you with this first initial brainstorm, and then begin to research the ways in which trade, race, health, and those other 2 topics are going to affect that community. These first 3 sections are what are going to be due for Module 4. So I don't necessarily expect you to do sections 4 and 5 yet. I do recommend that you wait until you get some feedback first, and then dig in to sections 4 and 5. And I will strive to get that feedback to you as early in the week as I possibly can. Likewise, the earlier you turn this assignment in Module 4, the quicker I'll be able to get you that feedback. The last 2 sections are important in terms of the analysis portion. So you'll want to be looking at how does globalization, what are the similarities and differences in how globalization impacts you and this community that you're looking at. And as I said earlier, go beyond explaining the similarities and differences. Think about why. How do the different factors that make up that country, so be it political, economic, social, religious, environmental, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. How do all these things impact the way that globalization affects you and also the country that you're looking at? And then section 5 is what are the greater takeaways from this? What does this teach us about the diversity of globalization? What does this teach us about the different ways in which globalization impacts a community, both for the worse or for the better? So often we hear, well, globalization is really good, but for who? Why is it good? How is it good? Likewise, when we say globalization is bad, how? Why? What are those impacts and what are those effects? And then what's the greater takeaway that comes from this? You'll see that this is a pretty there's a broadness to this, but this is also to give you the opportunity to pick and choose things that mean the most to you. So thinking about a country that you maybe want to explore a little more that's very different from you and different from what you're experiencing in the United States, you're allowed to pick some other topics that are going to help you think about the ways in which globalization affects you positively, negatively, a combination. So I really recommend that in starting this project, you start with the workspace and you put your workspace side by side with the rubrics. The rubrics are going to walk you through exactly what I'm looking for in all 5 sections of your paper, and then what I'm looking for in your video presentation as well. So I strongly recommend that you review this rubric first as you're looking at the workspace that you're going to put all of your details into. Your workspace can be messy, your workspace can be bullet points. I'm not looking for paragraphs necessarily. I'm looking for whatever way is easiest for you to get your ideas down onto paper, be it digital paper, but get your ideas down and start thinking about not only globalization's effect on you, which you've already been doing over the last couple of weeks, but then starting to think about globalization impact on others. You'll see section 4 that there is a focus on the analysis, the context of how globalization affects you and that other country, that other family, the synthesis of these effects. And then also you'll see the conclusions as well. So I strongly recommend that you look this rubric over as you start to do your initial brainstorm. As I mentioned, after I give you feedback, you'll do some peer evaluations. I do recommend that you start to apply the feedback that I give you before you submit your workspace next week during Module 5. This will allow you to get more feedback and different feedback from your classmates. So this is kind of the overview of the project. You have all of the information that you need here, but please let me know if there are things that you're finding unclear. As I recommended, the most important first steps for you to take is to read the assignment, read the instructions, read through the rubric, start to look at your workspace, and then go back to Dollar Street and start to think about finding a family that you feel can be your focus. Obviously, one of the big considerations is that we're going to be looking at ourselves, so a person versus a family or a community or a region. So there are going to be some differences that come from that, and I am aware of that. But remember your main goal of thinking about the diverse effects of globalization on different communities and what is causing these different and diverse effects of globalization on these different groups. So it's not going to be a complete one-to-one. I understand that. I am aware of that. But again, the idea is to be looking at why and how is globalization either affecting communities differently or affecting them in the same way, and what we can do about that, and how that adds to our understanding of what it means to be living in a global society. If you have specific questions, I recommend that you subscribe to the forum and make sure that you're posting any questions. I will get those answered when I see those come in. But the most important thing to do is to read through those instructions, read through the rubric, get an idea of the focus that you want to have in terms of how you're going to look at yourself and how you're going to look at your other community. And then I will be really detailed in the feedback that I give you this coming week to help kind of give you even more foundation as you start to dig deeper into these different topics. One final thing, we have covered trade so far. So that is going to be the section that is probably the most detailed. As we start to talk about race and health these next 2 weeks in Module 5 and 6, then I expect to see those sections become beefed up as well. But I understand that, by the end of week 5, your focus is mostly going to be on trade and industry and on race. Health will come when we start to do Module 6. So please let me know if you have any questions. Please let me know if you'd like to meet to chat about this in any way. But really the most important thing and the best way to get started is to think of a family, think of a region, think of a country, think of a global location that is different from you, that might have very different experiences from you in regards to globalization, and to start there. So I'm looking forward to seeing your initial thoughts as you start to work on your workspace. I'm looking forward to also seeing, of course, your final presentation. Please use the Google document as I put comments in to respond to any of those or ask for any clarification or to make those changes. That I'll be looking for those changes to be in your final analysis at the end of the semester. So I hope this was helpful. I know this was a fairly long video. Feel free to watch it on a quicker speed, but I wanted to give you not just the written instructions, but for those of you who are more auditory learners, to have that as well. So looking forward to seeing your projects over the next couple of weeks.